saying, Sean, we feel like you're the kind of guy that's like, you don't want a gray answer. Like you want a yes or no. And if you're not sure if she's into you, like when it comes to like if someone's like into you or interested or not, like, and I feel like
Yeah.
you kind of threw it out there at the True Circle and like you didn't get like a hard yes, hard no. And I feel like you were like looking in that conversation, like, do I have a chance with you or not?
I think that makes it easier just in relationships in general when it's pretty clear. But yeah, I would love to know like where I stand with people. Obviously, we found out, I guess, where I stood with her. I wish she would have told me a little bit clearer. But
how do you feel
yeah.
like the convo went? Like at the end, were you like, okay, I'm glad I had that. Moving on. Like, what was your feeling leaving the conversation?
I remember leaving the conversation like, what the fuck did we just talk about, honestly? But I think it gave me clarity in one way. It wasn't necessarily with her words, but more with just like the feeling I had leaving there. So it was a helpful conversation for me. I don't know if we accomplished much, to be honest with you. I don't know.
Well,
but,
I mean, essentially, it leads to your demise because then we see everything that goes on with Rachel. So, was that getting that clarity worth it, or do you kind of wish you just would have just waited?
I mean, I think for me, truthfully, it was one of those things I had to figure that out. Like I had to go in and have that conversation. And at the end of the day, if me and Rachel weren't going to like make it past that, we probably wouldn't have lasted and may have found some different people the next week. It was never for me. Like I truly did want to find somebody. So like going into that conversation was very, very helpful. Like, hey, like what are my options here? Who do I like? Who am I vibing with? And it was giving me clarity one way or the other. But obviously, I guess that conversation was the catalyst to mine and Rachel's demise. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So you're chatting with Jess, and we see Brayden go over to Rachel on the beach, and he's kind of trying to suss out how serious the relationship is with you and her, if he's got a chance, if there's an opening. Like, I feel like you kind of hit the domino effect of people now jumping ship. Like you've opened that door. You did. You're the first person that did it. You started this train wreck. So Brayden's now like, Sean's taking his shot. I'm gonna go take mine. And I don't know if he was like, if it was his move to bring this up or if he was genuinely just trying to figure it out. But he basically says that you have been portraying it that Rachel's really into you and you're not sure. That's what Brayden tells her. And that leads to a super heated conversation between you and Rachel, heated on her end, where she's like, hey, what the hell is going on? Can you just kind of walk us through what happened there?
Yeah, it was confusing. Like that whole thing was really confusing because I had talked to Rachel previously before going to Jess. Cause like, hey, I want to have this conversation. Like I had a great conversation with her earlier on. I just want to see where things at. And we had already talked about, we're pretty open with that. And she was so understanding. She was great. So then I come back from that conversation and have the conversation with Rachel. So I was like, wait, you just told me like, hey, like go have that conversation. And now you're mad at me. I'm a little bit confused. I had no idea at that point that Brayden had kind of led that catalyst in there. So I'm like, all right, like what did Brayden say? Why is he portraying it like that? Because I remember talking to Brayden, and at this point, right, like me and Brayden didn't necessarily get along on The Bachelorette, but we were friends in paradise, and like I really enjoyed spending time with him, and there was definitely a change in my opinion of him. And I remember sitting at night in the palapas, like with him and Aaron S, and like we were close, right? And I remember talking about like, hey, like I really like hanging out with Rachel, like, but there's something that's just like holding me back from fully committing. So that's kind of how I was portraying it. And that's not necessarily that it was like, oh my God, like Rachel's way more into me than I am with her. And like, I just want to stay here. It was more so that I was like, I need to figure this out from my own internal perspective to figure out if I'm going to move on with Rachel or like figure out things with Jess. So to come back and kind of see Brayden like put it in a negative light, it was definitely, I felt a little betrayed, felt a little hurt. It sucked. Like that night in paradise, fuck, it sucked, man.